Good morning. As you see, my topic is the Romm Publishing and Printing House, and at the outset I would like to say that we should distinguish between a publishing house and a printing house. Not every publishing house is a printing house, and not every printing house is a publishing house, and the roles of the publisher and the printer are still different, and they used to be different. So, but in this case, in the case of the Romm family, there were publishers as well as printers. So that's mean one of the unexplained phenomena in historical research is the lack of a certain issue of historical event, or to be more precise, why a certain subject, marginal and negligible, attracts a significant interest among historians, while others, central and important issues which affected the lives of many, has been marginalized and even pushed out of the public historical consciousness. A typical example of this case is the fate of the publishing and printing house of the Romm family, which established by the end of the 18th century in northern Belarusia and moved to Vilnius, known by then as Jerusalem, Lithuania, by the beginning of the following century. At its outset, this publishing house was intended to serve the needs of the Jewish population on both the local and regional levels. And then they printed mainly Jewish religious literature, prayer books, editions of the Pentateuch, holiday prayer books, Passover Haggadot, and collections of Sliches, Skines, Trines. Likewise, they printed scholarly religious literature, the Babylonian Talmud, halachic literature, exegetical and ethical texts, and to a highly limited extent, belles letters, poetry, philosophy, popular sciences, folk medicine, and history books in Hebrew and Yiddish, as well as in some other languages, mainly in Polish. And already at this point, you can see that it's not just, a regular publishing and printing house. We have here a completely different phenomenon. Yet, until mid-19th century, this publishing house was one among many other Jewish printing and publishing houses in Eastern Europe, in Warsaw, in Odessa, in Grodno, in Minsk, in many other centers. As important as it was not particularly prominent in the contemporary world of Jewish printing and publishing enterprises. Now, following the death in 1860 of David Romm, the owner and the manager of the publishing house, his young widow, and here begins the real story, Deborah Romm, a mother to 6 orphans and completely inexperienced in business and of printing, publishing, and management, assumed management. At this time, the printing house was handed over to her. It was already a business with a relatively broad scope. However, in a relatively short time, the young widow quickly transformed this publishing house into one of the largest and most significant Jewish economic enterprise all over Europe, and not only all over Europe, well, actually all over the world. There were hardly, apart from, the Rothschilds and some others, but this publishing and printing house by, let's say, the 1880 was one of the biggest Jewish economic enterprise all over the world. In Europe, in America, in the Middle East, wherever. In England, obviously. However, despite all the aforementioned, the history of the Romm family publishing and printing house, including its financial, commercial, and cultural and gender aspects, it is virtually unknown. Thus, for example, we lack even a full and complete catalog of the books, journals, and newspapers published by this publishing house, and there were hundreds of them. What was the relative proportion of the various journals published by this press? Prayer books, the Babylonian Talmud, philosophy, and belles letters. We know even less about what were the criteria, whether or not to include a commentator or another in the prestige edition of the Babylonian Talmud. How Deborah Romm formed her network of relationship with local non-Jewish publishers, and we know very well that she had a very close relationship and connections with the powerful local Polish publisher and printer, Mr. Zawadzki, Joseph Zawadzki, and his sons. Thus, despite the tremendous effect it had on the process on shaping the cultural world of the Jews of Central Europe, in the last 200 years, this famous and powerful institution, at least until World War I, not only almost completely forgotten by the Jewish collective memory, but has also received almost no real attention in historical research. And what you see here are some books which were printed. This one was printed by the Romm family by the beginning of the 19th century. This is 1810, and this one in Minsk, and this also again in Vilnius, and this also by another publishing house, Vilnius, 1824. But this, I mean, what you can see on the spot that they are very, I would say, basic, even simple, regarding to the design of the books. And this is sort of a journal which was published by them by the 1841. Okay, now this is our hero, and this is the only portrait which we have. Do we have another one? Not yet. Let's say not yet. As you can see, well, I would say she's a real Litvische Yidina, or little woman. I mean, her eyes. I mean, okay. Now, maybe there are some. I mean, I'm not going to get into it. Why this publishing printing house did not get real attention within the Jewish historiography up till now, but against its background, a group of historians recently organized, in collaboration with a number of public institutions, the Department of Jewish History at the Goethe University of the Negev, the Dubnov Institute in Leipzig, the National Library of Lithuania, and the National Library of Jerusalem, of Israel, in Jerusalem, in order to examine and reconstruct the history of this exceptional institution. Why exceptional? And here, in this case, it seems better to let the numbers speak. First of all, just a minute, let me, you can see here the figures. Number of copies printed in Romm's printing house, 1849, 1859. You see the rapid increase, from 40,000 to more than 100,000, which is quite a lot. And let me remind you that Vilnius by this time is a small town. Well, even, comparing to Warsaw, to Odessa, obviously St. Petersburg, and still such a huge enterprise you can find in this place. Now, printing machines in Jewish printing presses in Vilnius, and here you can see, that the Romm, 75% of speed machines, which this is another term for modern printing machines, and 8, which is much more than the other 3, So this gives us some sort of an impression of what was going on there. Workers in Jewish print presses in Vilnius in 1863, and this is already the time of this lady, as she is known as the widow. Nobody knew her as Deborah Romm. Everybody knew her as the widow. And you can see here that in the Romm printing house, they had, you see, 77 workers just in the printing division of this firm. It's not the entire people who work there, just the printers, 77, which is a lot. And this is about 17 years before they embarked on this huge project of the new edition of the Babylonian Talmud. While they embarked on this project, they hired, another 50 printers, just printers, and there were others who were, involved in, designing, marketing, proofreading, and so on and so forth. So let's come back to this. What was so unique in Deborah Romm is her management strategy. First of all, organizational and commercial aspects. Appointing a professional managers. She knew that she is not a professional manager in regard to printing and publishing. So she hired some people who were very, I would say, professional. And the most famous one was known as, his name was Fagenzon. He owned a small printing house in Panevėžys, in northeastern Lithuania. She hired him. She brought him to Vilna, and he became the professional manager. She hired another guy who was the economic manager of the firm. But she was on top of it. Every serious decision was taken by her. And just recently we found more than 200 letters written by her in her own handwriting. They are kept in the National Library in Jerusalem. And surprise, surprise, they are all in excellent Hebrew. All of them in excellent Hebrew. And please, so there's something about Jewish ladies, Jewish girls who study, and I'm talking about, by 1860s. Secondly, arbitration mechanism for settling interfamily disputes. There were quite so many interfamily disputes in this family. The more money, the more disputes, the more disagreements. And everybody who knows something about the Romm, that the title is printed by the widow and the brothers. But the word widow is already bigger than the brothers. So she was quite clever. The firm, as an independent economic entity, she separated it totally from the family wealth. Well, actually, in one case, she herself lended money to the printer. Okay, so a mechanism for dealing with censorship. Mechanism in this case means what we call in Hebrew envelopes, or in many other languages, and she was very good in it. Keeping production schedule in line with planning. The entire printing house was burned down twice during the years when the first edition of the Babylonian Talmud was printed, but she did whatever she could in order to keep production schedule in line. An aggressive fight against competitors, and here I can have 1 hour lecture about how did she broke down all those who were trying to compete her with all these aggressive ways. Rough negotiation with authors and suppliers, and you just have to read Abraham Mapu's letters to his brother, mourning that this lady, she robbed all of my money. I wrote, and then I have all these excellent novels, and who get the money finally? Her and not me. Not Mapu. The professional aspects. Modernization of the printing process. She was the first one all over Eastern Europe to import from Germany the new technique of what was known by this time as the stereotype system for printing, which enabled her to reprint and reprint new editions. Proofreading at the highest level. She hired the best and the most talented proofreaders, among them rabbis and maskilim and others. A revolution in typography. If you look at the, hopefully I have one here, you see? This is a revolution in typography. Previous to this edition, there was no edition of the Babylonian Talmud of this type. Where she got it from, we know. They stole it from someone else. But, so I'll come back to it in a minute. Prestigious design, as you saw. Intensive use of public media. Deborah Romm used the Jewish media in Hebrew and in Yiddish intensively. She published on and on. And if you go through Jewish newspapers and Hebrew and Yiddish by this time, you can hardly find any issue without some sort of an advertisement by this publishing house. And sophisticated marketing policy, which I'm not going to get into it now. So, another one of her best idea was in the new edition of the Babylonian Talmud, she incorporated, I mean, the previous editions of the Babylonian Talmud before this edition had about, I mean, the text of the Talmud, the Rashi and Tosfot on both sides, and then about in between 20 and 25 other commentators. What they did in this edition, they incorporated more than 100 commentators, which made a lot of impression on, yeshiva students and rabbis and so on, and contributed a lot to the prestige of this edition. At the same time, she, as I said, she published some other, not only the Babylonian Talmud and the Pentateuch and the Sidurim, but some other, products. As you see here, it's about the Elijah Vilna, Agra, and these are the, a compilation of the poems of Adam HaKohen, the most famous Jewish poet until Yalag. His son's translation of the story of Troy. This is a sort of an historical narrative of the Jewish community of Vilna. And this is something which I just recently found. You can see it here. You see? She had this, she published a sort of, how do you call it?
Flags.
Sorry? No, she didn't print the flags. I mean, you could order each, I mean...
Reference for flag.
Sorry?
Reference for...
Yeah. So, I mean, you could order, I mean, she published a small booklet with all different types of flags, and you could order any flag which you wanted to, okay? With the certain colors and so on and so forth. So you see here. So to sum up, what I just said is what we call a work in progress. We just begun. There's a lot of work to do. We know, well, actually we know very, very, very little about what was happening in this enterprise. What we do know is that this lady deserves I would say a better attention among scholars and among students, among historians, and what we are trying to do, what we hope to do in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Depends on you.
Depends on me. No? Is to reconstruct this huge, magnificent, enterprise, which was active in Vilnius since the beginning of the 19th century, and in a way until the end of the 20th century, almost until the end of the 20th century. However, under different managements, but still there is no similar. I mean, as far as I know, there used to be no similar enterprise regarding printing and publishing in the Jewish world like this one of the Romm printing house and the lady Deborah, known as the widow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really, you could feel that Professor Zalkin gave us only a taste of what is there, right? And it still was a lot. So do you have any questions? Maybe it was a bit overwhelming, her personality and her innovation. But thank you very much. Maybe we'll think of some questions later and we'll address them privately.
Well, during her life, nobody dared to ask her questions.
All right. Well.